Today, we're going to talk about how to get more harvest out of your grow each year. It's called Perpetual Harvest, and you're going to love it. But before we do, this video is brought to you by Real Growers Recharge. For bigger roots and better fruits, you got to check out Real Growers Recharge over at realgrowers.com. Come on, let's get into it. I see you ready?
I'm ready, man. What is this perpetual harvest thing you've been telling me about?
It's doing two things at once, man. It sounds complicated. It's super simple. It's having a veg and a bloom at the same time.
First
Okay.
of all, give me a
sir.
foundation. How does growing work with the light cycles?
Okay. Wow, we're going back, man.
Yeah, assume that I've got one grow tent.
One grow tent, you're going to have to grow your plants to get them big. That takes 18 to 24 hours of light. That's your vegetative light cycle. Then once they grow to the size you want, you're going to click the light back to 12 hours on, 12 hours off, and that's going to initiate flowering.
Okay, so I'll have my plants vegging for about 4 to 6 weeks, maybe.
That's pretty big. I'd say 3 to 4 weeks or something, in a tent. We'll think about a tent right now.
Okay, and then I flip the light cycle to go into bloom and let them bloom for
8, 9 weeks. We'll call it 8 weeks.
Okay, but you're telling me that that's one way of doing it, but now there's another way that I can constantly be almost constantly be harvesting.
Well, sure. At the end of 8 weeks, let's think about it. If we have one tent, we've got to grow our plants for 3 or 4 weeks. We'll call it 4 weeks in vegetative. Then we've got to click the lights back, and for 8 weeks, we have to flower them. So that's 3 months. So once we pull those plants, are we starting with seeds again? Are we going to the store and buying little tiny clones again? Because if so, you've got another 6, 7 weeks in veg by the time your clones or your seeds pop, and then 4 weeks of veg, and then another 8 weeks of flower. So you're talking, that's 4 months, I'd say, something like that?
Yeah, so if I'm vegging and letting them go from seed or clone, I'm looking at about 8 weeks.
Sure.
And then if I'm blooming, I'm looking at another 8 weeks. So a total of like 4 months.
Yeah, that's 3 harvests a year.
Yeah, it's not very much.
It's not very much. I mean, if you can do it now, if you can either get yourself a smaller grow tent, something simple. AC Infinity has those ones that have 2 sides to them and a divider in the middle. You can either cut some clones. The way I do it is I cut some clones before they go into flower. I've got a couple weeks in the cloning chamber, and then I put them in a solo cup. They call that the teen stage. I put a teaspoon of grow dots in there. It handles it for, at least a month, and then I stall them out. I let them just sit in there for, maybe a month or so, and I get them, nice and stalled out. They're maybe, 5, 6 weeks. At that point, I've only got 3 weeks in flower until I need something to replace them with. So I could just get those teens nice and big. If I wanted to, I could put them in a 1 gallon or even a 3 gallon, depending on my grow style. And then when I harvest, even if the plants are completely ready, I put them into veg for a week or so, and then I flip.
Okay, so that got a little bit confusing for me, but let me make sure I've got the idea. You've got your plants in clone and in veg in the same environment. Like you mentioned, that AC Infinity tent. You have them on one side of the tent.
With 18 hours of light, yep.
And then as soon as they're ready to go into harvest, you put them in, or as soon as they're ready to go into bloom, you move them over to the bloom and immediately put some new plants, some new clones back into veg, so that when those first ones are ready to harvest, you're ready to take those ones out of veg and put them into bloom. So you've constantly got some plants in veg and some plants in harvest.
Yes. And even if you don't do it perfectly, even if you have to pull your plants out of veg, and you're like, oh, that's a little small, you can put it on the other side in the bloom tent. You could turn it, the lights and to the vegetative stage for a week. You've only lost a week at that point. You haven't lost 5 or 6 weeks waiting for them to go from a tiny bit of a clone to a giant plant.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not hard to do, especially with, if you're going to put one tent and, one 2x4, why not put a second 2x4 in there?
Okay, so that does bring up the one objection is it does require more equipment, maybe a little bit more room, a little bit more of an investment. Maybe your wife isn't too pleased with that.
Could be. I mean, she should be pleased with the fact that I'm getting twice as much medicine per year as I was before, and hopefully not having to go to the dispensary and pay retail prices. That really is what this is all about, man.
Right. Okay, so always have plants in veg or cloning or maybe in seedling
It's a good investment, man. For a couple $100 for one of these tents, think about what happens if you have to go to the dispensary or rely on a friend to get new clones every time as well. You're spending more money there.
Right. And you did mention AC Infinity, a friend of the show,
Yeah.
has a tent that it's one tent and it has a divider so you can do the Perpetual Harvest
Yeah.
in one tent instead of two.
Yeah, I'd support them because they came up with some really smart gear. So that the tent, it's a 2x2 on one side and a 1x2 on the other side. I think they got them where they're 2x4s as well. But just a really cool tent that you can grow a plant or two in and keep on vegging. So, I mean, the difference is 3 harvests a year or 6 harvests a year. You want to call it 5 or 6 harvests, but you're doubling your output, which is huge. It's what we're doing this for.
Absolutely. Okay. Perpetual Harvest. I'm still a little bit hesitant to dive into this, but I feel a lot more confident in it. Thank you for explaining it, man.
It's my pleasure, man. Try it. It's a huge upgrade in your grow game. You're always cloning, you're always vegging, and you're always flowering. It keeps you on point, man.
Nice.
But that's me. That's how I do Perpetual. I always have a veg and a bloom anytime I set up a grow. But what about you? Are you a fan of Perpetual Harvesting? Let me know in the comments. And if you like this video, please smash that like button, hit that subscribe button, and check out the other couple videos YouTube is recommended for you.